We'll get started in a few minutes. We'll start a little bit after noon-ish. We're here where we are in central New York. I know we've got a global audience today, which is wonderful. But we'll hang tight here for the next few minutes and then we'll go ahead and get started. But I'd like to just welcome everyone as you're coming in. Good to see you here. Hi, Annie, welcome. Thank you everyone so much for being here today. This is our first gathering for the Child Life Academic Society Writers Club. I'd like to just take some time to thank everyone. I know time is not in excess, and for our colleagues who are in academia and our community who is practicing, and for our students who are studying, we recognize it's a busy time for everyone. So I just like to thank everybody for being here. My name is Colleen Cameron. I'm a professor of practice at Syracuse University, and I am a member of the Founders Council for the Child Life Academic Society. Before I get started, I'd just like to do a land acknowledgement here at Syracuse University. As a member of the Syracuse University community, I would like to acknowledge with respect the Onondaga Nation, firekeepers of the Haudenosaunee, the indigenous people on whose ancestral land Syracuse University now stands. And on behalf of Child Life Academic Society, we are a group of full-time child life academics. We also have an Emeriti Council, which is comprised of retired professors who are still active and engaged with student development. We are a novel society. We are looking to advance pedagogy, scholarship, research. So today's event certainly falls in line with that. We're really excited to hear from our editors and authors today from a new text that just came out. So I'm happy and thrilled to highlight that. We have Child Life Specialist Genevieve Lowrey, Lindsay Murphy, and Cara Smith, who are our guests today, and really, again, welcome. And at the end, we will do a question and answer. So if you do have questions as we're talking, please go ahead and put that in the chat. Also, we are recording today's event. It will be placed on our YouTube channel. So there's many folks who said they would love to be here but couldn't. So we'll just make sure that this is accessible for those who couldn't be here. So to introduce our guest speakers today, Genevieve Lowrey is a faculty instructor in child life in the graduate program at Bank Street College of Education. She received her Bachelor of Science in Early Childhood Education at Child Life Wheelock College and her Master's of Education from Fordham University. Lindsay Murphy is an assistant professor and the director of the graduate program of Child Life Studies at Missouri State University. She received her Bachelor's of Science in Child and Family Development with an emphasis of child life at Missouri State University, and her Master's in Education is in School Counseling Psychology with a mental health focus, also from the University of Missouri. And she completed her PhD in Human Development and Family Science, also from U of Missouri. So go U of Missouri. Cara Smith is working and practicing as a certified child life specialist at Sidra Medicine in Doha, Qatar. She received her Bachelor of Science in Psychology from Graceland University and her Master's of Arts in Human Development and Family Studies and Child Life at University of Missouri in Columbia. These are the editors in the publication that we're going to be talking about today, The Role of Child Life Specialists in Community Settings. This text is the latest in our field and discipline-specific book, and it can be utilized in both, the academic and service settings and has implications far and wide. So I'm happy to be here to further our understanding and our knowledge of how child life specialists can function outside of medical settings. And before we jump into the book, I would like to just invite our speakers today to tell us a little bit about you and what guided you to the child life profession and kind of where you are now. So we'll start with you, Genevieve. If you could tell us a little bit about how you found the child life profession and where you are now.
Sure. Well, like most child life specialists, I had no idea it existed. I went to college to be a teacher because I thought that's what you did with children. While I was there, I discovered I did not want to be a teacher very quickly. And I was at Wheelock, and the only other major they offered was child life. And they said, go speak to the advisor, Dick Thompson. And so I did. And the rest is really history. He encouraged me to do volunteer work, which I went on to do. Walked into a hospital setting and was like, this is where I was meant to be. And that's really, I think what drew me to the profession itself was one of my favorite aspects of it, is taking really big, difficult ideas and concepts and breaking those down into small, manageable bits of information and finding really creative ways to present that information. So that's sort of me.
Genevieve, thank you. Lindsay.
Hi, everyone. It's great to be here. What drew me to the profession? I am a self-proclaimed ambulance chaser and always have been. Since I was a child, I have made my parents chase whatever emergency vehicle went by. So I'd be lying if I didn't tell you that I was always chasing like high acuity emergency situations. And I think initially thinking out my profession, I find myself doing well in those situations. I find myself being a calming presence, energized by being able to do something versus just feeling helpless in those situations. So I think, for many, many reasons I joined the field. I think that's one of the main reasons that pushed me into the field, was just knowing that that's what brought me energy. That's what where I felt I was good at interacting with others, and where I felt most at home, I guess. So yeah, that's probably what drew me most to the field.
Lindsay, thank you. Let's hear from Cara.
So I started in my undergrad. I went in with a double major in pre-med and psychology, and I didn't really know why. I was just drawn to both those fields, and it turns out that child life was the perfect meld of both of those for me. I ended up with a psychology degree because it was my senior year and I needed to graduate in 4 years, or my parents were gonna be very upset with me. And it was the only degree I could get where I had enough credits already that I'd be able to get out in 4 years. So I was really passionate about that, clearly. No, I'm just joking. And then I just really fell in love with, I really love resiliency. I really am super passionate about play. And so it was the perfect meld of all those wonderful things. I was 8 years at Children's Mercy in Kansas City, and then I've been teaching for 9 years, and just 4 months ago came back into the field. So it's been a little bit fun to jump back into the clinical piece after being in the academic world and seeing if I actually still know what I was talking about when I was teaching my students. So it's been fun. It's good.
Great. I think it's wonderful to see, I think everyone here has been a practitioner and an academician. So it's really great to see when those who are teaching child life have been in the field and have experienced what it's like to practice, which is, I think, one of the unique and key features of our academic society and folks out there. I think mostly everyone has, pretty much practiced in the field, if you will, which adds to the richness of our discipline. Let's jump into the book. Wow. Only you know how challenging this is, or if anyone here, I know Deb's been published multiple times, but if you could talk to us, or if someone would be willing to say, how did this textbook come about? What were the driving forces?
Genevieve was the driving force.
Well, the three of us had been working together on a different project, and through Child Life Disaster Relief is how we sort of met each other. I will say that all three of us have clinical experience in hospital settings, but we also had a real interest in what does child life look like in the community, and all three of us had searched out various opportunities to do that kind of work and explore that concept. And so when we finished the project at Child Life Disaster Relief, I thought to myself, it's really hard to find people that you love working with. And so when I find those people, I like to figure out what are the projects we could do together. And so I called them up one day and I said, I have this idea for a project. I really want to work on with you guys on it. I didn't even tell them what the project was, and bless their souls, they were like, yeah, let's do it. So that was sort of what was sort of led to us meeting, talking about the writing of this book, or editing this book, is all of our own really passion and drive for wanting to bring child life into the community. I will tell you, it wasn't, and none of us had done this before. So this was one of those very steep learning curves. None of us had ever done this before. We really had no idea what we were doing. So we started out with just sort of researching publishing companies, trying to figure out who had experience with what. People gave us, references on different places. We never in a million years thought that our first place that we sent the proposal to would accept us. We thought that was sort of the, that's sort of the one that you toss out there and then you work from that, right? The draft, so to speak. And we found out within a short amount of time that the book had been accepted. The idea for the book had been accepted. And then we sent out asking for submissions for chapters. We had a list of what we thought was out there, and that was exceeded by really so overwhelmingly the ways in which that child life specialists are using their skills in a variety of community settings with various different populations of children and families that are facing a whole plethora of challenges. And it was really, one of my favorite memories is when we had a Zoom meeting, we brought them all together, and the energy even in a Zoom meeting was just really electric. And it was really hard to describe, because everybody just was so excited to have a forum and a platform to share the work that they had been doing, and to have the work really be acknowledged in a way that maybe it hadn't really been before or prior to that.
If you could, or Lindsay or Cara, maybe speak a little bit about, give us an overview. So you're getting together, there's some driving forces. Let's give us the broad overview of what this text is all about.
You guys want me to? I think the idea behind the text was, originally we started with the idea of non-traditional settings. And I'll let Lindsay share how that changed. But what really, I think all three of us had really worked and used our skills in some different settings. And I always say I didn't leave child life because I didn't love being a child life. I didn't leave being a child life specialist in a hospital because I didn't love the work of being a child life specialist. I loved because I wanted something more. I wanted to do it differently, and I knew there had to be a way to do that. And this book is the culmination of that and more, because there were so many people out there, it turns out, that had the same ideas that we did. and took them to levels that we couldn't imagine ourselves. And so it was really a coming together of those minds. I don't know, let the other two chime in also on this one.
I'll just say, so one of the projects I had my students do in one of my courses was to go into the community and to find an organization that is not related to child life, to figure out how child life could fit in there, and to create sustainable resources for that organization based off of the principles of child life. And the very first year I did that, students went into a prison and they created a prep program for kids who were visiting their parents, and it was a federal medical prison. And so the process that they would have to go through to visit, and the prison, I could not get them to stop calling. They're like, we need more. We need you to come in and do parenting classes. We need you to I just saw how clearly child life fit into that world. And originally I was like, oh, that'd be really cool. Someone should do that. But then when you start seeing how preparation, developmentally appropriate explanations, play, building connection and relationships, like all of those things that we do in child life were so applicable in a prison. And so from there, I had students working with airlines about supporting kids who are scared to fly. They just went everywhere and blew my mind. They were working with veterinarians on helping kids with pet loss. Like, it was just everywhere that they went, I was just so blown away. And it just really brought alive how real our skills are in the community settings. And then as I was getting to work with child life disaster relief and go in after hurricanes and see the work that we did there, I began working with the police force in Kansas City. And I think it's so clear how our skill set prepares us to work in these environments. And I think that's what was so exciting, and the driving force really behind this book is that the excitement that we shared, like, we really want people to see that. And I know, I feel like in this group, just from things that Lindsay and Genevieve have shared, that's a really exciting topic. I know outside of, not everyone is really excited about the role of child life outside of the hospital. And so we really wanted this book to get into people's hands and help them see, like, it's not a scary application of our skills outside of this set. It's exactly what we're doing. It just is in a different framework. And so that's what was super exciting for me, is to get that conversation going, get people seeing that this work is already being done. I think oftentimes we like dream about, oh, wouldn't that be cool if child life did that? But like, read the book, they're doing it. Like, you don't have to dream about it anymore, but it's being done. And it gives you permission to not only go into those areas and do it, but also see how it works in other areas.
Yeah, I'll just add a quick overview. We have over 31 authors, which I think was super exciting. We have so many unique voices sharing how they practice in these different settings, such diverse settings all across the world. So I think that was super exciting. For each of those chapters, we had 3 blind reviewers who were also certified child life specialists. So just so many different supporters and people who contributed to this book. And we ended up we had lots of chapter submissions or proposals. We ended up with 18 chapters, and those chapters are divided into 4 different categories. So we ended up with a healthcare category, a settings category, population, and then a frameworks. So that's how the book's kind of designed.
Well, I see here, the text covers critical areas that include addiction, adoption, behavioral health, child advocacy, disabilities, disaster relief, family well-being, gender, grief, hospice care, and also incarceration. And you talked a little bit about that, and I believe, Genevieve, your chapter focuses on that. And I think when we think about child life specialists providing support, we think about in medical settings, that, meeting the psychosocial needs of children and families dealing with illness and injury. Can you talk about what might be really important for us to know about this chapter, or about the role of the child life specialist when really addressing kind of this risk and resiliency for families impacted by incarceration?
Yeah, so, one of the things that we felt really strongly about is the connection to the child life competencies and the 6 domains of child life practice. And we really felt really strongly that we create these sort of lines, like these sort of linear lines that go between, here's what happens in a healthcare setting, here's how we can apply that to these other settings. I had for 7 years been going into a prison and doing a parenting discussion group. And I went in with a very different idea in my head of what they had said, what the prison work, or the people that worked in the prison had said to me, this is what we think the men in this group need. But when I got there, what I discovered was that what they needed was support in how to tell their children that they were in jail, how to talk about addiction, how to have conversation, how to parent from within the prison walls. They wanted to be good parents. They knew how to be, they just didn't know how to do that from within this setting. And what we know about resilience is that when we can maintain those relationships, when children have strong, supportive relationships, when they have information, when they have coping tools, right? All I'm listing here are the pillars of child life, right? That when they have these skills, or when they have these tools, then they are able to manage different challenges, and are able to mitigate the traumatic experience, right? There's so many points of stress that Cara spoke about in the project that our students did, even in where children come, where families come up against that stress. And as a child life specialist, our role is to identify those stress points and then to figure out, how do I help that family? How do I help that child? How do I help that family to decrease that stress, to better manage it, to be able to walk through those situations? And the first thing that came to mind was one of my very first jobs was I worked in day stay. I prepared children for the OR. So to me, that framework of preparing children, walking them through the process of getting an operation, come see what this looks like, here's how you can do this, is so similar to me of when children came to the prison or the jail to visit a parent. What does that look like? What do you need to do before you get there? What can you do to prepare yourself for that experience? Where are the stress points in the waiting? What are the questions you may have? How can I demonstrate and show you what does that experience look like to be in a no-touch situation? How can I help you mitigate the stress of that experience?
We got a quick glitch here. Let's see if we can pick up here. Is everyone else experiencing that glitchy? Yeah, okay. All right.
Looks like the lights might have gone out too, so it may be a little bit more than a glitch.
Okay, so we'll hold on. We're going to pause on Genevieve's thought there. And I'm going to actually bring it over to you, Lindsay. So it sounds like, you know, we're using these core competencies. And my question is, you know, are these really applied, or is this part of our core competency? Do you have thoughts about, you know, do we consider these community settings applied, or do we consider it something to be part of our practice?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think this is something that really relates to the title change of the book that we actually had. I think, you know, initially we sought out to create a book titled The Role of Child Life Specialists in Non-Traditional Settings. And as we, you know, received proposals for chapters, and as we as editors continued to discuss what should be defined as non-traditional, what should not be defined as non-traditional, you know, historically, non-traditional started as child life specialists leaving hospitals to then support children who are ill or you know, out in the community. And so related to healthcare, related to medical, but out in the community. And that's where really integration into the community settings began. But as we continued to kind of meddle with all the services that we were providing as certified child life specialists, because of our competencies, we really realized it was time. The time was now. We had some pretty pivotal conversations with other leaders in the field as well. And it shouldn't be non-traditional anymore. It shouldn't be the exception. Our services in the community shouldn't be seen as non-traditional or out of the ordinary, or this is different. It should be seen as our services should be the standard. And so I think, you know, when you ask about our competencies and what is this in the community, I think it's the standard of care. I think, you know, any setting where a child or family is experiencing stress, I think they have a right to the services child life specialists provide. And I think as we continue to evolve, I think, you know, of course, you know, integrating into the field in these, you know, into these positions initially that were already created, that might have been already budgeted. We had a lot of conversations as editors about the titles of child life specialists. We initially thought we really want people who are certified child life specialists only as authors of this book. So we want people to see that certified child life specialists are doing this. And what we realized is there's so many child life specialists who are doing child life work, who are utilizing their competencies, providing child life services, but a lot of child life specialists are working under these other titles. And that was imperative to get out there and to get into the field, and it served us, and to get out into the community, and that really served us well. But I think as we continue to evolve and continue to push towards a standard versus exception, being non-traditional versus we are in the community and we should be, I think it's really imperative that we continue to think about how, you know, we push for our titles to include child life specialist. Because I think if we're at high risk if we don't for our services to dissolve into all these other titles, or people not to recognize that what's actually being provided is child life services.
Thank you, Lindsay. It makes me think about, as I go to Cara next here, kind of the global perspective. Cara, my understanding is that you've left the States and are now doing, what we would consider international work. And I believe that depending on where you are in the globe, you may or may not have the title of a certified child life specialist. I think that there's, hospital play workers, psychosocial care providers. Cara, if you could talk about maybe how this book positions itself or what it means for the international audience.
Yeah, I think that's so. Actually, one of my roles here within my role that I'm working at is to start to build community around psychosocial support in the Middle East, and so we're starting to build a network, and it's amazing where people are like I had no idea there were so many people doing this work in this area, and some of them are trained in child life or have some sort of connection to child life. On our team now here at my hospital, we have 2 health play specialists, and it's been awesome to get to know that field and to understand that connection. I think it's huge for a number of reasons. And this maybe shifts the question that you've asked me. I think when we look for our role outside of the hospital environment and where we can do that work, it gets our skills and our needs to the children who need it, who may not ever receive hospital care. When you're working in environments, I've worked here and I've worked in other areas of the world in developing countries, and hospitals aren't where people receive healthcare, right? They receive support in other places. And so when we're going to meet children's needs, we need to meet them where they're at. And oftentimes that's not in the hospital. But I think the other thing is accessibility. As we're looking, I've worked in South Africa. I'm now working in this area and trying to get people certified as child life specialists. It's impossible. It's not impossible, but it is really, really challenging. When you expect people from all over the world to be able to take a test in English when that's not their primary language, to have a Western worldview in a test when they're and trying to train people to shift their culture and their thinking in order to pass a test and then come back into an environment where it may not work the same as it does for us in a Western worldview. That's really hard. So I think if we can shift away, and Western healthcare is very different than healthcare in developing countries. So I think if we can, again, shift to the focus on our competencies, and Genevieve didn't get a chance to say this, but we really do outline what she calls 5 10As, 5 pillars, whatever you want to call it, that we do as child life specialists. And that is, we do play, we do developmentally appropriate explanations, we do coping support. Genevieve, I can't remember the other 2. What are our other 2?
Preparation, play, coping, expressive arts, and developmental explanations.
So when you can shift to those being the 5 things that child life specialists do, you can apply that anywhere, right? So working with refugees, what developmentally appropriate explanations do kids in refugees camps need? What language and words are they hearing that they're not going to understand that I can now explain? What preparation do they need for transitions, for knowing what life looks like within this camp? How can we bring play into this environment to help facilitate healing, to help them understand better? Expressive arts comes in there as well. And how do we help kids cope? It's not a medical procedure, but there's all sorts of other challenging events that are happening with these kids. So how do I teach the resiliency skills in this context? And when you think of child life and those 5 skill sets that we're actually doing, it's super easy to apply them and teach them and then build competency around them. And this leads into a deeper part of our discussion is how do we then test for those competencies, not necessarily within the healthcare environment. Oh, I'm unstable. Can you hear me? Okay. The whole world is in Doha right now, so internet is a little tricky. But how then do we test for those competencies, and can we certify based on those and not have to be in a healthcare environment for certification? And that then opens the door for, I think, a more diverse and equitable field where people can, even in the US, we have awesome candidates who can't move for a semester to a big city, right? But can they find ways to get trained and certified and know those competencies and be able to work within the field in their communities? And I think that opens the door internationally and at home.
Cara, thank you. Genevieve, you were talking about, working with a particular population in who are influenced by incarceration. I don't know if you were able to pick up where you left off.
No, I think I actually, when my internet cut out, I
Okay.
think I had actually finished my sentence. I hope that y'all got that. But there was some, there's a piece that I really want to stress here, what Cara was saying. I'm sorry if I'm repeating since I got lost in the abyss of the internet. This idea of applying our work to these other settings and the idea of creating structures and academic programs that teach to the competencies, and as opposed to this idea that we only can live and work in a healthcare setting, that we are limiting ourselves, and that we really need to start thinking about how do we broaden the scope of the training for the student so that students have more options when they are looking for internships and when they are looking for jobs. Many of our authors of our chapters ended up in community settings because they couldn't get a job in a hospital setting. And they end up staying in there because they were feeling fulfilled in that work as a child life specialist, whether they had that title or not. Now, we'd like everyone to have that title, but currently that's not the situation. I think another really important point is this idea of, crap, I forgot what I was going to say. This is when the internet needs to go out, right? Lindsay, I'll hang. Lindsay, what am I forgetting? I was about to say something about, the 6,000 hours of it was decided by the community task force that there was a 6,000 hours of recommended before people go into community work as a child life specialist. And to me, that's just creating a whole nother barrier rather than looking at the ways in which that we train students and then creating internship possibilities that then can open up the doors for the profession, as opposed to sort of always having this sort of healthcare experience be the sole opportunity for them.
Excellent point. It makes me think about, what are the ways in which child life academic programs, internships, in medical and not in medical settings, what are the ways in which we can look at this text and say, hey, this can be some foundation to the knowledge, skills, and abilities that students might need in the future as working as child life specialists outside of a medical setting?
So I don't want to monopolize the conversation here, but one of the things that I always say that illness doesn't happen in a vacuum, and that children with illnesses have lived experiences that they can either draw from, or that the hospitals or that the illness triggers for them, right? Triggers increased anxiety and decreases their ability to cope based on if they've had an experience with a disaster previously, or whether they've experienced a school shooting, or they have or they have a parent who's been incarcerated. And that as child life specialists, even in the hospital setting, need to be prepared for if those show up in play. We need to know how to support children who demonstrate anxiety or stress around those circumstances. Or we also need to be able to identify if a child has developed a positive coping skill that we can draw from and utilize. So there's a lot of parallels between the two, and being able to connect. The book is about child life community settings, but it's really for any child life specialist, whether you're working in a hospital or whether you're working in a community setting.
I'll jump in and just say that I really felt that asking my students to go into the community and apply their skills there made them much stronger students when it came to the hospital. Because they were able to, they had to go into these settings and explain what child life was to know people who had no concept or framework for it. So they had to find the verbiage to know what they did. But B, it made them really identify the skill and the competency rather than I need to know how to prep every single procedure that ever comes up, or I'm not going to be ready for an internship, right? They sometimes get in that framework of like, I have to, and instead it was like, okay, can I walk into this setting regardless of where the kid is? identify the stressors, and then figure out what skills I have to help support that child. So it's less about the recipe for the like perfect intervention in a hospital setting, and more about having to think outside of the box to identify the stressors and how do my skills apply. So I really think using this book and this framework to teach makes, whether students want to go into the hospital or want to go into other areas, I think it makes them stronger everywhere, because it's more of that genesis of creating, you know, a world in which I know my skills and then I go into a setting and I use those, rather than being told this is the situation, so now I do XYZ because that's what, you know, my book tells me to do.
Thank you. I'd like to open up the Q&A to the audience. You can either unmute or raise hand, or you can go ahead and type your question in the chat box. We are here with Genevieve Lowrey, Lindsay Murphy, and Cara Smith, editors and authors of the text, Child Life in Community Setting. Did I just say that right? Did I get it wrong?
Got it right.
I said it right.
We don't really remember. It's close enough.
Well, you know, to talk about emotional labor, I'm sure with, you know, publishing this. We have Tiffany says, what an awesome assignment, Cara. That's to your assignment where you had your students go in and, you know, put it to task. Where should you find a child life specialist? Deb Velas has a question here. What chapter surprised or taught you the most?
Child life specialist working with human trafficking was one. Honestly, almost every chapter that came in, the three of us were like, oh my God, I want to do this job. Therapeutic photography was one of my favorites because it was just so, I don't know, there was just something really creative about it, and the ways in which that she was applying her child life skills to that particular therapeutic intervention was really fascinating.
I don't think, say the photography one again, Genevieve, what was the title?
It was therapeutic photography is what it was called.
Okay, excellent, thank you.
I think you went on mute, Colleen. Are you?
Colleen, you're muted.
Colleen, I think you muted yourself.
Here we go, thank you. Our next question's from Priti. Questions about the cost of the book. She is congratulatory towards you, and she greatly appreciates this book, but she's wondering, you know, she sees the price at, you know, a high number of $200. Can you talk about that and why that might be that price point?
That's probably something we should have talked about when we were in the things we learned section, is to maybe negotiate the price of your book prior to signing your contract. That was a big surprise to us as well. The good news is there's a number of ways you can get the book. You can get the book in hardcover, you can get the book in soft cover, and you can also get the ebook. And if you use the IGI 50 code that we have, you get 50% off of your book. So that's just IGI 50. You can share that with anyone. You can share that with your students. I don't know if it lasts forever or not, but please do that. We get nothing for this book. I mean, we got like a small stipend at the beginning of it. So none of that money is coming to us. And we did negotiate for a lower book price, and we did get a lower book price, but it's just the nature of the beast in publishing, especially when you're publishing an academic book. And we're sorry, like we really had no control over it.
Well,
it was very sad for us as well.
We can lean on universities to put that into their library, you know, I think is always a good option if we're concerned about that. Leora's got a question. Would you ever consider creating an assignment guide that could be used in the classroom along with this book?
We love new projects and great ideas.
We will add that to our list.
Because I do came out, you know, and even, you know, with Deb's publications, anyone's, you know, we can think about assignments linked to research articles, but certainly textbooks are foundational. So I'm just, you know, thinking about, you know, what would be an idea that one of you might have about an assignment that could link, what, you know, any thoughts or, you know, ideas that you might have about what would be a fun way to integrate this into a syllabi? I
teach a course at Bank Street on the role of the child life specialists I can never remember the actual title, the role of the child life specialist, I don't know, something, in community settings or beyond the hospital, local, national, global view. I'm not terrible, I can't remember the title of my own class. And I will be working because it happens that class starts in the spring. And so I will be working over the next couple months to use this book and adapt many of that's an fully online course, figuring out ways to use the book where students can, hoping to have them annotate different chapters, use the chapters as a platform for discussions, really trying to think about, I do assignment already that's similar to what Cara does, and really trying to figure out what are the ways that I can use the book in my own class. I'm not sure that I've totally nailed that down just yet, but I am hoping to really use the book, and I'm also hoping to use the book in some of my other courses as well, so that the cost of the book doesn't feel like it's just for this one class, but something that they will use across the 2 years of the program.
Great, thank you. Lindsay, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I'll just add an idea. I do a lot of like self-reflection, personal discovery in my classes. And I think for me, that's how I learn best, when I can really apply it to myself. And I find my students do well with that as well. So I think even thinking about a time in their own lives where they could use a child life specialist outside of healthcare, think about a time in their own lives where a close loved one or a friend could use the child life specialist, and how those competencies could have supported themselves or that friend. Would be something totally beneficial. And then using the book as a reference to see how these competencies can really apply in any setting, just as they apply in radiology, as they do the ER, as they do in hematology, oncology, they apply in foster care, they apply in refugee centers. So I think just broadening the perspective that child life isn't hospitals, that child life is these competencies, and these competencies apply everywhere.
And Deb has a point here, even, beyond your kind of child life fundamental coursework, but even coursework in grief and loss, that this would apply to as well. Excellent point, Deb. We've got time for one or two more questions. Tiffany, yes, please.
Hi, I just wanted to thank everyone for putting this together. I'm kind of kicking myself. I remember when the proposal came out and I wanted to do it and then never got around to it. I have been a doula and brought child life into childbirth, and I thought about doing that when it came out, and so it's really cool to have seen the proposal and see how it's all come together. Congratulations. And something that I am hearing a lot is, especially among child life specialists who have maybe dual licensure or certifications in counseling, they express a lot of concern about scope of practice and what our scope of practice looks like outside of the hospital walls. And Cara, I feel like you addressed that a little bit in one of your earlier statements. And I totally agree. I feel like the competencies are really applicable across different situations. So is there anything you could suggest in terms of when people are feeling that kind of nervousness about scope of practice, especially when it overlaps with different things like coping and things, there's several different types of providers that kind of, where there's some overlap there. Does the book address that at all? Or is there anything you would suggest we can kind of bring up in these important conversations about staying in scope? I hope that makes sense.
Well, I'll jump in real fast and address a couple of things with that, if that's okay with you too. First of all, we didn't say this, but one thing that was really important for us in this book is that everyone that has written a chapter, the only qualifications they needed to do the role that they're in is to be a certified child life specialist or a child life specialist at some point. It was really important for us. Oftentimes we talk about child life working outside of the hospital, but it's people who've gone on to get their MSW and other things like that. And that equips them for the role, which is awesome. But I think that's where kind of that scope of practice gets a little shady, because it's like, okay, which degree are you using in this role? And so we really wanted to be people who were I don't mean that like to minimize what we did, but that was their only credentialing, was Child Life, to show what that did. And I think it's a great conversation. I think the world is in a mental health crisis, so I don't think we need to be too concerned about, there's so many kids that need support right now, and so there's more than enough space for us to be doing the work. With my students, and whether this is right or wrong, I work really closely with counseling. I work a lot with my counseling friends, and the way that we have discriminated is because that I am working with kids preventatively and in real time to give them the coping skills that they need. And my counseling friends are often working with kids after an event has happened, more long-term. In Child Life Disaster Relief, we talk about how we're in that 24 to 48 hours after event occurs is when my skills are really good because I'm used to the crisis. And then beyond that, if symptoms develop, that's when they're going to see my counseling friends. So I really see that as we're mitigating and we're at the real-time crisis, and then we're passing on to our friends who are more equipped to work with those mental health issues that are developing as a result of the crisis. But I think this book does create a really good environment for you to have that conversation with your students so that they're then thinking through that themselves rather than trying to regurgitate that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lindsay or Genevieve. Any additional comments on that?
I just wanted to add to Tiffany that we are already exploring edition 2 and keeping that edition 2. So don't lose sight of us.
I think Cara really captured it really beautifully. We were really clear that we wanted to make sure that people could do these, that people were doing these jobs with their child, that these jobs could be done with their Child Life credential. And the fact that we really encouraged and stressed that we wanted people to ground what they were doing in the competencies and in the 6 domains of child life practice. And that in so doing, and that when you do that, then you are really staying within those pillars of child life, that you're thinking about it from that perspective. How do I prepare children for visiting a parent child? What do children need to be prepared for? What are the expressive arts? What are the emotions? What are the feelings? How are the ways that I need to support children emotionally in those moments, right? What are the coping tools that they may need? What are the stress points that they're going to be identified? And so then what are the coping tools they need? That when we stay within those sort of pillars of child life, that helps us stay within our scope of practice also.
There's also Jerry and Deb are talking to the scope of practice and ethical guidelines, and also clinical supervision. Deb, I don't know if you want to kind of speak a little bit more to that.
Well, I just became involved in the Child Life Community Circle. And it's kind of a membership organization where PDUs and other things are available. But one of the needs is clinical supervision. So we're going to be piloting our first kind of look at that with professionals between January and April. We're going to be running bi-weekly supervision groups in the same format that we run conference groups and field work for students in field work at Bank Street. So looking at different ways to provide supervision, whether people are in hospitals or in the community. And when Cara talks about her counseling friends, that's supervision. It may be informal and it may be based on a social relationship, but when you have somebody to touch base with who comes from a different scope of training, we all help keep each other where we're supposed to be. And I just think it's really, really important.
Katie Taylor, who is the Child Life on-call person, is also one of the authors of our chapters that she wrote about the use of technology and virtual platforms. And yeah, supervision came up because supervision was something that many of that some of our chapter authors spoke to in sort of the challenges of the work is that they didn't really get adequate or good supervision. And that there are, some of us out there, myself, I think Deb does also, there's a few others of us out there that will provide supervision to those that are working in those types of settings so that they have access to it, but it's not something that's super well known. You have to sort of, and not everybody can afford to do that. So there's, how do we talk to, so even just how do you talk to your employer about the need for this and where does it come from? That I agree with Deb, that's a really important piece. Especially for those working in community settings, that they are looking for and thinking about how do I get clinical supervision for the work that I'm doing.
Excellent, thank you. The role of the child life specialist in community settings serves as an innovative guide for those interested in pursuing child life in diverse settings with the education and credentials received through their child life certification, and addresses issues in the field currently faces related to saturation of the field, burnout, diversity, equity, and inclusion. My final question will be for any of you who would like to say, we are seeing a lot of focus on diversity, equity, inclusion, accessibility. There's a staffing crisis. We continue to be a 99% white, female, able-bodied, cisgendered profession. What can you say with how this text can bring us forward in our thinking of how we're going to be addressing these issues?
Well, I will just say, I really feel like it provides some tangible things that we can do to make we talk about making the field more diverse and we want to be more equitable, but I think this is something that actually will do that. I had students, I keep going back to that assignment, but it really was the catalyst for thinking of child life in this way. But I had students who were offered jobs as a result of the work that they did. And then they came to this position of, do I take this really great 6 months off to go to a hospital internship? Or is there a way that I can stay invested in my community, stay part of the child life community and still pursue certification? So I really think that it opens up doors for people to work in environments where you work with more diverse clientele, again, because you can go into the community rather than families having to come to the hospital, which we know not all families seek healthcare. So I think in those ways, it diversifies the populations that we're working with, and it diversifies the people that are coming into the field.
Yeah, I agree 100% with what Cara just said. I think that by opening up the door for, if we can figure out a way to make community internships a reality for people, that we are encouraging different abilities, different learning styles. We are encouraging people from different socioeconomics, from different cultures, to be able to enter and become child life specialists, to use their lived experiences and their knowledge in a variety of settings, that we will change, that will change the face of child life. And one of the things that we really talked about was this barrier to internships, because the competencies nowhere say, the competencies don't say anywhere in them that it's healthcare related, but the internship portion does. The internship is what says it has to be in a healthcare setting. If we could change that piece to say in a community, and healthcare is included in that, if we look at the way that we train and teach our students to consider child life work, not only as part of preparing children for illness and supporting them through illness and hospitalization, but also in a variety of other challenges and life-changing events, we will open the door to people not needing to move across the country for an internship. For someone who maybe can't lift or push a crib, to be able to work in providing play in a homeless setting, right? Like there's so many other ways that we can use our skills, and we're limiting our own capacity to really imagine and dream what our future would look like.
Thank you, Lindsay. Anything you'd like to add to that?
My co-editors did such a beautiful job. I think they did a great job. Everything I had to say, they've said.
Great, wonderful. Well, thank you, everyone. Again, on behalf of the Child Life Academic Society, I'd like to thank you for all taking time to be with us today, spending time with editors, authors, Genevieve Lowrey, Lindsay Murphy, Cara Smith. And Lindsay, if you could just show us your book that we're so proud of you for, The Role of Child Life Specialists in Community Settings. The discount code is in the chat. Use that. And please keep a lookout for us. Our next Writers Club will take place in January. We will be featuring Dr. Jessica Bowles and her publication title, Hospitalized Children's Perspective of Legacy, a symbol of yourself that you leave behind. Thanks for everyone. Stay tuned. We'll be posting on our Instagram, LinkedIn, and this will be uploaded to our YouTube channel. Thank you so much.
Thank you all for being here.